Of course, we should ban kitty and libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
The left loves to present itself as America's moral compass, righteous, informed, and always standing on the right side of history. But Bill Maher isn't buying it. Despite being a lifelong liberal, he's become one of the left's biggest critics, calling out the hypocrisy and denial eating away at his own side. Maher says the once noble liberal movement has traded truth for tribalism and reason for rage. Bold claim, maybe, but wait until you hear what he says next. It's the kind of truth bomb that sends a so-called truth, police running for cover.
And I don't completely believe any of it. Not right away, not until I check it out. And when I ask, is it true? Usually the answer turns out to be, well, sort of. Or yes, but, yeah. See, we've all become very adept at saying things that are technically true but lack context, or that leave out half the story. So if we're going to ban untruth, does that include the half-truth, the quarter-truth? And wait, don't the wokest people in the world believe that what really matters is your truth?
Of course, we should all agree that threats, incitement, and calls for violence have no place in public discourse. They're already illegal. That's common sense. The left often boasts about policing truth, proudly banning obvious lies, conspiracy theories, and criminal content. And sure, that part's easy. No one is defending misinformation or crime. But that's not where the real battle lies. The real danger begins when truth itself is twisted, filtered, edited, or selectively framed to fit a political agenda. When facts are cherry-picked to protect an ideology or silence disagreement, that's no longer truth policing. It's truth manipulation. Maher's been calling this out for years. He's watched the left drift from defending open debate to enforcing ideological conformity. They're no longer just debunking lies. They're deciding which version of the truth the public gets to hear. And that's the most dangerous kind of censorship. The one disguised as virtue, carried out in the name of protecting people from ideas they're perfectly capable of judging for themselves.
So yes, of course, we should ban kitty libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
Maher isn't holding back when it comes to the DNC's handling of COVID. In his words, the party that preached trust the science was often selling selective truths instead. He slammed how information was filtered and how anyone who questioned vaccine mandates was instantly branded ignorant, selfish, or even dangerous. During the pandemic, mainstream outlets flooded the public with terrifying headlines claiming the unvaccinated were overwhelming hospitals. But Maher pointed to data that told a very different story. According to him, the numbers were exaggerated to push compliance and shame dissenters. In reality, less than 1% of those who refused a shot ended up hospitalized. That's not just a correction. It's a revelation that flips the whole narrative upside down. For Maher, it's one more example of why blind trust in political messaging leads straight to mass deception.
And so should it be in the digital town square. And so should bots and deep fakes be banned and anything else that aren't really the people who say they are. But that's an entirely different thing than actual people expressing an opinion as repugnant or offensive or as misguided as some opinions may be. This is still America. Where people have the right to express what they think, including to be wrong, to lie, and yes, the right to be an And if you think you know everything and no one else could possibly have some other truth, you should be glad for that protection, because you're an
And that's exactly the problem. The woke crowd seems permanently offended by everything. Nothing is safe anymore. A harmless joke, a classic poem, or even a decades-old movie suddenly becomes problematic because someone decided it doesn't fit today's ever-changing moral code. It's like walking through a cultural minefield where intent no longer matters. Only interpretation does. Comedy, once the last refuge of free speech, has taken the hardest hit. Comedians now second-guess every line, afraid of being labeled insensitive or canceled over a punchline. And even though most Americans are tired of this outrage circus, the self-appointed woke crusaders won't back down. They keep pushing, trying to sanitize humor and redraw the limits of what's acceptable. But here's the irony. They've only proven Maher's point. When everything's offensive, nothing's funny. And when that happens, truth becomes the ultimate taboo.
41% of Democrats last year believed the hospitalization rate if you got COVID unvaccinated was over 50%, when it was actually less than 1%. Somebody's misinformation got to those people. Sometimes misinformation is just history's first draft. I see a lot of things on social media and also on old fucks media.
The most frustrating part of cancel culture is that it never ends with an apology. You can delete the post, issue a heartfelt statement, and bend over backward to make things right. But it won't matter. The mob isn't looking for remorse. They're looking for destruction. Once they decide you're guilty, their goal is to erase you completely. Your job, your reputation, your income, even your family. Nothing is off limits. One misunderstood joke or an old comment can snowball into a full-blown witch hunt, amplified by social media outrage and virtue signaling it's no longer about accountability. It's about dominance. It's about showing who controls the narrative and who gets silenced. And that's what Maher keeps warning about. When outrage becomes entertainment and forgiveness disappears, society stops progressing. It just eats itself alive, one canceled person at a time.
Someone knows of a story that more effectively captures what's wrong with today's journalism than the sad saga of what happened last week at the Washington Post. They need to keep it to themselves because it would be too depressing. If you missed it, the Washington Post recently got embroiled in a self-inflicted shitstorm when one of their best reporters, David Weigel, retweeted this joke. Every girl is bi. You just have to figure out if it's polar or proving it is a joke. Thank you. The comedian who actually wrote the tweet called it a banal throwaway joke, which is exactly what it is. Throwaway, as in if you don't like it, throw it away. For eons, both sexes have made jokes about how the other is crazy, and no one but the perpetually offended thinks it means anything more than that the sexes get frustrated over how differently we each see the world. And yes, we relieve some of that frustration with humor and scene.
This is exactly why cancel culture has to stop. It doesn't know when or where to draw the line. What starts as a call for accountability quickly turns into a crusade against anyone who dares to think differently. It's never enough to condemn one person. The mob also targets anyone who defends them, questions the outrage, or even stays silent. Guilt by association becomes a new rule. Before long, the cancel crowd is digging through years of posts to destroy careers, reputations, and livelihoods to a cycle of moral hysteria fueled by fear. People stop speaking their minds, not because they're wrong, but because they're terrified of being next. That's the real danger. It turns society into a self-censoring echo chamber, where intimidation replaces discussion and public shaming becomes a new form of control.
Nevertheless, Weigel pulled down his retweet and wrote, "I apologize and did not mean to cause any harm," and that was the end of that. I'm joking, of course. The unlicensed daycare center that is today's newsroom went. You see, the Post has another writer named Felicia Sonmez, and she's a lot. For example, she tweeted about Kobe Bryant's 2003 rape trial hours after his helicopter crashed. And despite the fact that she says Dave Weigel is a good friend, she resurrected the tweet he had taken down with a screenshot and demanded to know what the Post was going to do about this unacceptable evil that must not be allowed to stand. sarcastically writing, "Fantastic to work at a news outlet where tweets like this are allowed." Yes, can you imagine a world that allows jokes you don't?
The woke crowd doesn't seem to understand that people make mistakes, that humans grow, evolve, and learn. To them, one bad opinion or a clumsy joke from years ago is enough to define you forever. There's no room for context, no space for redemption. They ignore the obvious truth that as we age and experience more of life, our perspectives naturally change. What someone said at 20 doesn't represent who they are at 40. But to the outrage brigade, personal growth doesn't count. All that matters is moral purity in the moment. They've forgotten that change is what makes us human. We're supposed to rethink, to improve, to become better versions of ourselves. Yet the woke crowd acts like evolution is a crime and forgiveness a weakness. Maher's right. This obsession with permanent punishment is exhausting and deeply un-American.
Of course, the leadership at the Post folded like a Miami condo and suspended Weigel without pay for a month and denounced the offending retweet as a gross violation of their values, free speech apparently not being one of them. Then a third Post reporter offered up the idea, of course on Twitter, because why do anything privately, that, hey, maybe everyone was overreacting and we should all just calm down. And then it was really on. Felicia demanded that the Post discipline him and tweeted about that. I assume she's tweeting about this right now.
At the end of the day, Maher's message is simple but powerful. Truth shouldn't depend on political affiliation, and free speech isn't negotiable. The left's growing obsession with moral policing, cancel culture, and selective truths is doing far more harm than good. When people are afraid to speak honestly, society loses its ability to think critically. Comedy dies, discussion fades, and all that's left is conformity. Maher might not be everyone's favorite voice, but he's one of the few brave enough to call out his own side. He reminds us that once truth becomes partisan, it stops being truth. Real progress doesn't come from silencing disagreement. It comes from confronting uncomfortable facts and allowing people to grow. That's the America we need back. One that values dialogue over dogma, forgiveness over fury, and truth over tribal loyalty. And that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe for more insightful political commentary like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.